Hey everyone, welcome back to Poplar Preparedness. We're going to be talking about high efficiency cooking in a disaster or an emergency situation. Now you may want to employ some of these practices in everyday living, but we're going to be talking about how to use cheap fuel, use alternate fuels, and we're also going to be talking about how to use a lot less fuel so that you can, in a crisis situation, be able to get the most bang for your buck from your emergency supplied stores of energy. Also be looking at alternative forms of energy to get into. So we're going to jump into these things right now. First thing is you need to be thinking about using cheap or plentiful fuel. There are a number of different ways you can go with this. If you're in a wooded area like I am, there's wood everywhere around here. So I can just walk off my property here and I can go find some brush, some sticks and stuff like that. I can walk around my property, but I also can go around to kind of public spaces that I could harvest some sticks and stuff like that from. And so a rocket stove really makes a lot of sense right here. I have a lot of wood stockpiled already, but just using brush and sticks off the ground, even using grass, that kind of thing is quite possible here. So if you have renewable sources of energy like wood or stuff that you can grow, even that's a great way to go. You're going to want to we'll talk about that a little bit in conserving that fuel. You want to focus that energy and make sure that you're using the heat that's generated from that and you're not just wasting a lot of it. A lot of typical campfires and such, cooking over those just uses up way too much energy, like your backyard barbecue. The barbecue is not a high efficiency cooking implement, right? Like a backpacking stove focuses the propane directly onto the cookware, whereas like a barbecue grill, a lot of the heat just escapes. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about with conserving that fuel. So wood is a great fuel because it can be free depending on where you are in the country. You can also stockpile that relatively easily. Next thing is going to be propane. You're going to want propane. Now you can get the 1 pound bottles like this that are quite expensive, but you can also refill these bottles off the 20 pounders. Or you can get the adapter that goes from the 20 pounder to a lot of things that are made to use these 1 pounders. You can use that conversion to make that leap. But propane is huge because you can store this stuff indefinitely, essentially. Just make sure that the metal itself doesn't actually turn to rust. If the shell itself rusts, eventually it will leak. But other than that, propane will last indefinitely like that. So gasoline, you got to rotate that every 6 months at the longest. You'll need to put stabilizers in there if you want to keep it for any longer than that. You need to be careful where you're storing it, all that kind of stuff. Propane doesn't have any of those issues, which is why I think it's like the go-to heating and fuel cooking source right out there. Now, you can go a little bit more expensive, and if you want to get the isobutane, like backpacking canisters, so I have a bunch of these. These are not so much for emergency use at home. These are kind of more if I need to travel a little bit, emergency use, or if I ever go backpacking again. I'll want to be using these kind of things. These things are a little more pricey. These units are a lot more pricey even than how much these things cost these days. You want to probably use these. Use those and the 20 pounders. You can get 20 pounders by going on like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace and look for people who are giving a good deal for empty ones, and then you can go back to the store and just exchange it for a full one. So even if it's not in very good condition, you can take it back to the store and exchange it and get a new one. I know it's hard. You don't want to go to the store and just buy one off the shelf because they're like $50 or something like that for a full one. You want to have one to exchange, so it's more like $20 for the gas that you're paying, and then if you can get a $10 for an empty used container, that's a great way to go. Also solar. I won't get into solar too much because that's a whole separate topic, but there's solar cookers. So if you're in an area where you get a lot of sunshine, and even if you're not in an area with a lot of sunshine, you can use a solar cooker. You can buy solar cookers, which are pretty expensive, or you can just make them yourselves. If you get Amazon boxes, like if you get packages from Amazon, just keep some of those cardboard boxes, okay? And then just make sure you have aluminum foil and put the shiny side up on the aluminum foil on the 4 flaps so that they can focus the sun into the box, right? And then use a black cook pot or something like that to collect the heat if you can, and put a piece of glass over top of it. That will make it a lot more efficient. Do be careful because with a cardboard box like that, it is possible that you'll set the box on fire. So if you're doing a good job at it, you might set the box on fire, but probably not. But just keep an eye on it, and if that glass is magnifying that at all. So that's. Sunlight is one of the most abundant resources we have, so that's a good one. Wood in some places is almost as abundant as sunlight, or in my place, it's actually more abundant than sunlight. But so propane, you can use diesel or kerosene. I won't get into those, but and gasoline, they're just not the best options, I don't think. I think most people should be, going towards this propane or isobutane, those type of solutions, and then also looking at like solar, and then looking at like rocket stoves. How do you build a rocket stove? If you have 5 or 6 cinder blocks, you can build a nice little rocket stove. Make sure you have a sledgehammer or some kind of hammer that you can knock out some of the cell walls. If you're making a double burner, which is kind of what I'm kind of in mind with the 6 blocks, you're going to want to knock out 2 walls there to make that kind of work. But just have the cinder blocks, and then you can build the rocket stove with those. Now let's get on to conserving fuel. So let's say you're using isobutane or you're using propane, and you want to make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. There's 2 ways of being more efficient. One is that waste heat that's going off. Make sure that you're capturing that waste heat. If it's wintertime and you need to heat your home anyway, cook indoors. Okay? If you have you set up like a warm room and then cook indoors in that warm room. This is what we used to do overseas when we didn't have much power. You have a warm room set up, and that way you're not trying to heat the whole house. You're trying to heat that one room. And yes, your whole family can sleep in one room, and it's fine. Everyone will survive. And being alive makes everyone happier, right? Thermoses. So they have shorter, stubbier ones. I have two short, stubby thermoses. One I got, it was like a 2-set. It was like a 24 ounce and a 17 ounce, which works good for a personal kind of situation. But if you're cooking for a family, that's not going to work quite as well. So you say, well, what are thermoses good for? Well, make sure you get a decent thermos that actually has either glass or metal lining on the inside, no plastic. Because if you follow my directions, you're going to be using boiling water. You can't pour that into a plastic thing, or else it's going to warp and deform and release chemicals and such like that. So you might want to go with a name brand thermos. Just other brands don't do quite so well. And if your life's depending on it, it's not that much more expensive, but the amount of fuel and energy that you're going to save by doing this is going to mean a lot. So how do you cook with this? So things like instant mashed potatoes, instant rice, even noodle packets like Lipton sides and such like that. Even though they say you need to boil them for 5 minutes, this will basically earn you 5 minutes of boil time, okay? So what you can do is you can preheat with boiling water. put the boiling water in there, and then you can use that for drinks or something like that. And then you're going to pour your instant rice, instant mashed potatoes, instant or like a Lipton side or something like that, something with real thin noodles, not something with chunky noodles or whatever. Pour that in here, and then you pour your boiling water in, and then you're going to seal it up. Make sure you have some headspace if it's going to expand. And then after you've sealed it up, you're going to need like 30, 45 minutes, something like that. If you leave it sealed up, it's going to stay hot for 4 to 8 hours. These things will stay hot. Your food will stay piping hot in there, which is great. So if you need somebody to have a hot meal to go with them, you can make them up a hot meal and close it up, which is kind of what it's there for. If you're going to use one of these long ones, make sure you have like a really, really long handled spoon or like a long handled spatula to get all the way down to the bottom of there. My short little stubby ones are real nice. I don't really use them very often, which is why they're kind of wandering around the house here somewhere, and I couldn't find them right off the bat. But one of these, this is a 40-ounce thermos. They're running right now $24 on Amazon. If you want the two little mini thermos food kits, that's like $34 for a 24-ounce and a 17-ounce with screw-down lid and stuff like that. I'll have links down in the description down below there. But so using thermos for instant foods, if you want to use this for beans, and because a lot of you, if you're following my directions and you're stockpiling a bunch of beans, dry beans, you need to pre-soak them, right? You can soak them overnight, or what you can do is you can boil them for about 5-10 minutes. Boil them on the stove or on overheat, and then pour them in here and seal it up. Preheat this first once again, but you're looking at, you do that, and when you pull them out, they will be fully pre-soaked, and you can then cook them once again for another 5 minutes or so. Pop them back in here again, and you will be ready to eat those beans. So 5-ish minutes of cooking, then in the container, out of the container, 5 more minutes of cooking, back into the container, and you are looking at beans that are done. So that is very doable. The thermos is going to save you a lot of energy on that. Regular rice, you need to boil the rice for 5 minutes before you put it in the container, okay? Boil it on the stovetop for 5 minutes, and then put it in the container. If you don't do that, it still comes out a little crunchy. It's edible-ish, but you don't want to do that. Boil it on the stovetop a little bit longer before you put it in here, and then let it soak for a while. Now, if you don't want to go out and buy a dedicated thermos, if you want to buy a dedicated kind of thing, you can just use a ball jar, mason jars. Now, this has leftovers, last little bits of my hot cocoa mix that I make myself, but you can do something very similar with one of these. Just be aware of a couple things. First thing, this is not insulated, so this will get cool relatively quickly. So how do you fix that? If you have some clean socks, you can just start putting socks and socks and socks until you get a nice, anything that you use to keep you warm, you can use to keep one of these warm. Okay, so clothing. There's also a way like where you build like a little nest, like get cardboard box and layer it with clothing on the inside, so it's like a little nest, and then you put the pot or the pan into it, and then you put like wrap all the cloth over top of it to keep it nice and hot and warm. That doesn't work as well as a thermos does. A thermos is still going to be more efficient than that, but if it's what you've got, or if it's what you can afford, do it that way. But having something that you can seal, it makes a big difference. And then having that insulation makes a big difference. So if you're cooking for more people, you can put the pot into the nest and keep it warm that way, but it's not going to seal, so you're going to lose out on that. If you don't even have mason jars to do, obviously you can use like quart jars. You can use like bigger or half-gallon jars. You can also use plastic tubs like these. Now be aware that if you use something like this with boiling hot water, that's not going to last quite nearly so long. But if you have a screw down lid on this, that at least is going to get you going in the right direction. Now, if you want to go another route, you can also do like a pressure cooker. This is an Instant Pot electric. If you have solar panels, a solar generator, you can use this off the solar generator. So that's a good use, but super high efficiency use of electricity there. You also have the stovetop variants. If you do canning and you have the big pot that might be a little too big for you, they also have the smaller pressure cooker stovetop things that you can use. And you know, all that pressure cookers are going to cook your beans and your rice a lot faster. That's going to get you where you need to be without using as much heat, as much energy. It's going to save you propane, going to save you wood, going to save you a lot of things. And it's also going to save you time, which is nice too. The Thermos method is not going to save you quite so much time. It's actually going to take you longer than if you just keep burning stuff and cooking over it. But it's going to save you fuel. So there's that. Also, finally, like I kind of alluded to already, if you can cook inside of a room that you need to heat anyway, that's going to help you out a lot. But do watch out for ventilation. Make sure you have good ventilation. Make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector in there as well. And if you start getting, you know, don't do it when people are sleeping. And if anyone gets a little dizzy or starting to get a little bit of a headache or something like that, be very sensitive to that when you're heating a room inside like that. Make sure you have good ventilation for the heat source. Whatever you do, and but think through how you're going to cook your food. If you've been stockpiling a whole bunch of food, great. How are you going to cook the food? Okay. One way, if you got a whole bunch of canned goods, what you can do is you can go down and you can instead of opening the whole can, you can just notch the can so it's got some vent holes in the top, and then you can cook it over the fire like that. A lot of them have plastic lining on the inside, so that's not like the best way to go, but you can do it. And if you just punch some holes, it's going to have enough room to vent, but it's still going to concentrate that heat. But it will start to boil over like crazy if you do that. So just, you know, if you're really trying to conserve heat, do that way. If you are not trying to conserve heat so much, like if you have a fire or something like that, you can open up the can and with an old school can opener, and then what you do is you peel back the lid, and you can actually use the lid as the handle to put the can in the fire. So you can always do that as well. So lots of things to think about and lots of things to think through, but what are your food preps and how are you going to actually cook them? Because if you don't have electricity, if you don't have energy to cook with, then a lot of that food's going to be a lot less tasty, and some of it's not going to be really edible. So you can only go so far with cold soaking, and some things like rice and beans, you can't really eat them unless you cook them. Okay. Pop your thoughts down below. I know a lot of you guys have thought through cooking pretty extensively, so that, you know, want to hear your feedback on that as well. If this video has been helpful to you, you might want to check out this other video from me right here. Otherwise, I will see you later. Steve Poplar out.